Welcome. This is the inaugural meeting of the City of Santa Barbara Independent Redistricting Commission. Our first order of business tonight is administration of the oath of office, and to offer that oath to our panel, Paul Casey, our city administrator, city clerk, will introduce himself and ask you to raise your hands and take our oath.
Thank you, Mr. Kalan. Do you want to introduce the judges, Mr. Kalan, and then I'll swear them in? That might be better.
I would be happier if, beginning with our chair, Judge Johnson, they introduce themselves.
Very willing to do that. Thank you, everyone. Very nice to be here. I'm Melinda Johnson, retired Superior Court Judge from Ventura County.
And good afternoon. I'm Judge Elizabeth White, retired from the Los Angeles Superior Court, and again, also very happy to be here.
Hi, I'm retired Judge Abe Khan, retired from LA Superior Court after about 32 plus years of service.
Great. Thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Casey. I'm the city administrator. First off, thank you very much for participating in this important process. This is our first independent redistricting commission for the city of Santa Barbara. So we thank you for providing us with your expertise and guidance through this process. I will read your oath of allegiance, affirmation of allegiance, serving on this committee. And so what I'll do, I will read the oath, and then at the end, if you say I do, that would be sufficient, and we'll do that. So this is for Judges Khan, White, and Johnson. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic? That you will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, and that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you're about to enter as a member of the Independent Redistricting Commission of the City of Santa Barbara, California, according to the best of your ability.
I will.
I will.
I will.
Thank you very much. I'll turn it back to Mr. Kalan.
Wonderful, thank you. That's a momentous event. Our second agenda item is the bulk of what we wanted to introduce to the commission tonight. Ms. Leone has prepared an outstanding summary. When I reviewed it the other day, I was stunned at how much information was in 15 slides. So get ready for a fast ride, and feel free to interrupt us at any time. Marguerite?
Yes, thank you, City Attorney Kalan. Honorable Commissioners, I'm Marguerite Leone, and I am special counsel to the City of Santa Barbara on redistricting matters. I worked with the city attorney on the staff report that was sent to you, and I hope you found it thorough, Judge Johnson. I appreciated your compliment. We went back and forth and included a lot of detail to give you the comfort of what we are asking tonight is really absolutely required. I worked with the city back in 2015 when the city moved from an at-large electoral system to by-district elections. I worked with the city attorney on the Banales case and with the redistricting, and am familiar with that background in a personal way. Those documents that resulted in the conclusion of that case and the institution of by-division elections are pertinent to our conversation today. And this is because we are asking you to authorize, approve, agree that we need to have some changes to the system for redistricting that is set forth in those documents and also in the charter. Slide number 2, which is the next one. Sarah, can you change that for us? I'm looking at, I'm not sure I can do it. There we go. This is what we're asking you tonight, and then I'll review in brief the background. Ariel, could you talk about what we are asking?
Thank you. I'd be happy to. We think the first step here is to make a factual finding, and I think the commission is especially well suited to do that, given your backgrounds and the work you've done thus far with our staff report. So based on that factual finding, we are asking that you direct me, with the assistance of our special counsel, to take the appropriate legal actions to get an extension of our November 2021 deadline. Appropriate action is intentionally vague, and I'll let Ms. Leone expand on that when we get to the back end of the presentation. There are a number of steps that we need to accomplish.
All right, thank you very much, Ariel. So we're looking for that finding and that direction from this honorable commission. And on slide number 3, I want to review a bit more of the background. You are bound by 3 documents to a November 1, 2021 date for the completion of your redistricting mission. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert right now. You're likely not going to have the data to do your job until sometime in October. You'll be lucky if you get it sometime in September. And that just is not enough time for you to do, counting the days, what the legislature requires you to do, and what the city and and I'm talking about the populace, would expect from a redistricting process. And we're going to review a little bit about that for you, but we want to give you the factual background for why this is necessary. You have received the settlement documents in Bañales, which included a settlement agreement and a stipulated judgment. Both of those documents include the November 1 deadline. And then, because the city charter, Santa Barbara is a charter city, was inconsistent with the judgment, the city council proposed to the voters that the charter be made consistent with the judgment. And on the 18th, in November 2018, the voters of Santa Barbara amended the charter to include the November 2021 deadline for completion of the redistricting. Okay, next slide. So that brings up, why did you pick that date? Well, events overtook us. At the time all of this was done, state law included a November 1 deadline for cities and counties to redistrict. We didn't dream it up. That what was in the law. And immediately after the conclusion of proceedings in Bañales, conclusion of the charter amendment, the law began to change rapidly and pulled everything out from under our feet. And that would have all been fine, but for machinations at the Census Bureau, and I'll get into those shortly. So the bottom line is, we coordinated with the then statutory deadline. Those statutes have since been amended. There have been extensive amendments, but as we sit here now, cities like Santa Barbara, with elections in November of 2022, unlike Santa Barbara, we'll get back to that, have a new deadline that when you count the days and calculate out the time is April 17, 2022. So let's go on to the next slide. So what is the real election that we're attempting to impact? As I said, cities with deadlines, elections in November 2022 have a deadline for redistricting. Comes out to April 17, 2022. The new districts then go to the elections officials, the election official imports them. There's a lot of technical work that has to be done before filing periods can open in the districts. So their deadline is April 17. But the next election in the city of Santa Barbara that will be impacted by these districts is actually 2024. So the November 1 deadline no longer makes legal sense. As you will see, it doesn't make practical sense from a census delay, but it also doesn't make practical sense from the needs of the city. Obvious question, how did the next election impacted by redistricting end up in 2024? Another change in the law in Sacramento. As we sit here, the city of Santa Barbara's elections are in odd number years, November of odd number years. There was one in 2019. There's going to be one this year. But after this year, the legislature mandated that in particular circumstances, the general municipal election needs to be consolidated with the statewide election. Those circumstances were met in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara dutifully passed another charter amendment. And the upshot of that charter amendment is that the election that would have happened in 2023 is moved to 2024. So we're attempting to comply with state law in many aspects. As the legislature amends these statutes, the city of Santa Barbara has kept the pace. But the upshot is we have a redistricting deadline that is obsolete, makes no sense, and is practically not necessary. So moving on to the next slide. I mentioned that the law has changed around us, and the city has attempted to get itself in compliance with the law, and indeed has been successful. We have a glitch here, which is a redistricting date that makes no sense. But it also makes no sense because it is likely, and I think actually, practically impossible to comply with, because you will not have the data you need to do your job as mandated by law. And at this point, this slide deals with census data. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Douglas Johnson to you now, who has been retained by the city for the purposes of redistricting. Dr. Johnson is an expert in redistricting databases, GIS, and software that you will use to do your jobs. And Dr. Johnson, could you address the status with the census, please?
Sure, happy to, and a pleasure to meet all of you. So I suspect we'll be spending quite a bit of time together, so look forward to working with all of you. And I should note I'm joined as well by Dr. Daniel Phillips, who's also from NDC and will be helping out with this project too. Really briefly, the census has been working to get its data straight and correct while trying to figure out how quickly they can get the data out. As you heard, the data was supposed to be out April 1st. That obviously did not happen. We're now looking, oddly enough, at 2 data releases. In what the Bureau has called mid to late August, we'll get the final census data. in what the Census Bureau is calling a legacy data format. The Census Bureau is then going to take some time and do it in a much easier to use format for the general public, and we'll release that at the end of September. But for our purposes, the legacy data format will be fine. Those of us that work in this field can certainly work with that data. So in mid to late August, the census will release the official census data. But the catch is that California has passed a law to address a phenomenon called prison gerrymandering, where large prison populations are used to puff up the population numbers for certain districts. So the way the state of California is addressing that is saying all of the state prisons will take the census count for that prison and move all those numbers back to their last known home address. So as you might imagine, this is a giant project. The state's been working on this since last July to work with the Department of Corrections and figure out who's in the prisons April 1st of 2020 and where should they be counted. So after the census data comes out, California's official redistricting data will come out about 6 weeks later because it takes the state that long to do that work apparently. So we're looking at having our redistricting data sometime around the start of October. So there's no specific date. It's all tied to exactly when the census releases the legacy data. But instead of coming out April 1st, the end result is around October 1st, we'll actually have our official data. And it may, oh yeah, and as noted here, it could be, depending on when that census data is released, it could be as late as October 15th. But we have our fingers crossed it will be about October 1st.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And Clerk Gorman, if you could advance the PowerPoint to slide 7. This data, these sources are in the staff report that was provided to the commissioners. This isn't something that's, word of mouth, heard on the street. You can go to the Census Bureau and read their releases. And I've quoted 2 of them here for you on slide 7 and slide 8. They are both cited in the staff report. On February 12th, we were told that, not we, I will say every state in the United States, we're told, we're going to give you census data on the 30th of September. That's 6 months later than mandated by federal law. 2 states sued over that because of how their election systems run. One of those has been dismissed. We can talk about the other one at another time. So we were at first told that the data would be available by September 30th. This is a quote from the press release. And if you go down to slide number 8, a month later, that scenario changed. If we can advance it to slide 8, yes. And in the litigation in Ohio, the Census Bureau made a representation in declarations that they could actually get the legacy formatted data out 6 weeks earlier. And so that is the subject of this press release. So California is fortunately one of those states that is sophisticated in the management of this data and can work with the legacy data. And as Dr. Johnson has told you, it will go through processing at the statewide database and likely get to you sometime in October, first half of October. The statewide database has put out a release on this information too, which I cited, which the city attorney and I cited for you in the staff report. And the statewide database has listed in detail the steps it will take to process that data and the anticipated timing. It comes out to about 6 weeks. So we may have data sometime in the second half of August. It will come to you sometime late September, first half of October. So bottom line, you're not going to have the data you need to do your job. And when that does come, you have a grand total of 2 weeks. So the question is, maybe you'll have 4 weeks. So the question is, why can't you get it done in that amount of time? You just work, you know, meet every day and get it done. Well, that's because there's a process for getting this done. I want to go to the next slide, City Clerk. I think it is, well, I want to move past slide 9. I've just addressed that. And let's go up to slide 10. There is a law called the Fair Maps Act in the Elections Code, and it governs your process for districting. It applies to charter cities. It is a procedural statute, and it has timing in there. This is brand new. We have never redistricted under this law before, so you're on a maiden voyage. But it has timing in there and requirements that are intended to foster public participation. For example, one of the first impediments to moving quickly is that the law mandates a waiting period after you receive the data where you cannot publish maps. It is a period of time where other entities get to work with maps, submit proposals, data needs to get cleaned up, Dr. Johnson needs to work with the data, but there is literally a hiatus anywhere from 7 to 21 days, depending on when the data is received, when you cannot map. You can't put forth a redistricting map. And then after maps are put forth, there's a minimum of 2 public hearings required. Those public hearings require 5 days notice, not the usual 3, but 5. That takes up a lot of time. And before you can adopt a map, you have to publish that map 7 days ahead of time. And in addition to that, the law has a premium on public participation. And there's a laundry list of steps that you are required in good faith to pursue to involve the public. And I think you can be confident that with a public and an electorate and involved citizenry as those in Santa Barbara, there's going to be a lot of people interested in what you're doing. And just by way of example, to give you a little bit of background on the 2015 process, City Attorney Kalan and Dr. Johnson, can you address what that process was? Did the public participate? Did we get maps, etc.?
Yeah,
Who wants to go first?
go ahead, Dr. Johnson. The answer is yes. We had an extremely active process. Go ahead, please.
Yes, happy to. It was kind of invigorating to see the public get fired up and interested in this process. And so even though it was done in a legal settlement context and was somewhat rushed because of that context, we did get lots of people at hearings, numerous public comments every hearing, various community groups organized and weighed in on their thoughts. The city put out with our help, put out a mapping tool so that people could draw maps online. And we got 21 different maps in, for 18 from residents and then 3 that we drew based on community input. So there was a lot of interest, even on a very accelerated timeline that they had to squeeze things into. And of course, we anticipate that now, as a regular redistricting cycle time, if you have sufficient time, the level of interest will simply go up from that.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And if we could go to slide 11, Ariel, could you tell us what we're looking at on slides 11 and 12?
Sure. This is good ideas don't go away. They just recycle, kind of like my tie here. This is a district elections map called a ward map from 1966. So Santa Barbara had district elections for many, many decades, abandoned them in favor of the new modern approach in 1967, and now we're back. What's interesting and hard to see, and we'll produce a better version, but if you look very closely, you'll see that the district boundaries, districts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're not all that different from where we ended up in 2015. Ms. Gorman, if you would advance the slide. Mr. Johnson, do you want to explain what this map was the product of?
Sure, happy to. Again, we got lots of public comments, and it was very interesting to hear people talk about the different parts of the city and how they each related to each other and related internally. It is funny, some of the districts look kind of odd and L-shaped and that kind of thing, but there's strong reasons for each of those. I'll just work from left to right. District 5, you get kind of up into the hills. You can see the white pockets in the middle that aren't even incorporated yet. Those are unincorporated pockets within the city, or were at the time at least. And so you get kind of the hills near where State Street and the freeway start to leave the city. Similarly, District 4 across the top, the big green district, is also, most of that is starting to get up into the hills. But of course, there wasn't sufficient population up there for a full district. And so you can see the red lines, they're a little hard to read, but the red lines with the red names on them, like Oak Park right in the middle, those are city designated neighborhoods. And so we were able to take the hills and pick up one neighborhood to get that to population balance. District 1, the blue or purple district over in the east, that's kind of the, I don't know if you refer to it as the flats, but kind of the flats below the hills, right by the ocean, and a heavily Latino area. So it worked out very nicely to be both a nice compact district and a majority Latino seat. Where the lines are a little odd between 1 and 4 is where there's the kind of a ridge line. So 4 has the area up on the hill, and 1 has the area more down in the flats. And then 1, 2, 3, and 6 all, well, 1, 2, and 3 especially, come together around the pier and State Street and that whole downtown business focus. So they each get a piece of that area, which continues up into 6 a bit. But 3 is also a majority Latino seat, really I guess the southwest side of the freeway. And then 2 is more a coastal seat, and 6 is really the heart of the city, right in the middle. So it ended up L-shaped simply because of the population balancing requirements for 4. When we're looking at where to get that last bit of population 4 needed, it made sense to come down to, I can't quite read that, I forget the name of the neighborhood, but Upper East, I think that is.
Yeah.
Yep. So again, these are all fairly Upper East, and the neighborhoods in 6 all are fairly well integrated, but sometimes the population number steps in and you have to make those choices. But as you look at this, and we also put these in maps where you can look at the satellite view and overlay this. Each one kind of has a definite character and takes on a different part of the city in a very distinctive way.
I'd like to add a couple of comments, if I might, Dr. Johnson. One of the things that jumps out when you think about the process of balancing population is the different size of these districts. What you can infer correctly is that the population density in District 3 is greater than the population density in District 4. And so you see that in both of the minority majority districts, 1 and 3, you have relatively densely populated areas. As I mentioned, I believe when we were interviewing, there's another distinction that reflects the impact of the Voting Rights Act. District 4, like all of the other districts, has around 15,000 people living in it. Of those 15,000, almost 14,500 are registered voters. In District 3, likewise with 15,000 residents, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 or 3,000 registered voters, if I remember correctly. And that really illustrates the point of the Voting Rights Act, providing representation for people who are otherwise unrepresented, meaning every one of those other 12,500 people in District 3 are not able to vote. And so their elected representative really has a greater responsibility in my mind. One thing this map doesn't show, and you can see it a bit on the bottom left, back when it was lawful to do so, Santa Barbara reached out through the ocean and grabbed the Marine Corps Air Station that is now our airport in Goleta, next to UC Santa Barbara. So that's off the map, and there aren't many people who live out there. The last thing on this that I wanted to, my recollection that I wanted to call out is there was some movement, as Dr. Johnson said, around the borders between 1 and 4. And there was also some movement around District 6 and 3. It's difficult to see in this map, but as Dr. Johnson said, both the 101 freeway and State Street serve in some respects as east-west dividing lines in Santa Barbara. And so you'll see that I think all of the districts touch State Street in some manner, or there was an objective among the people commenting to the city council that downtown State Street is so important, we should have as much representation there as possible. So many of the districts meet along State Street. Likewise, the 101 freeway in a narrow coastal strip like Santa Barbara or Ventura, for example, has the effect of walling off everything seaward of the freeway. And you can see that really apparently when you drive through the Lower East Side on Highway 101. To your left, as you're coming north or towards the water, is the city's industrial area. To the right is a minority-majority district. The Lower East Side, as Dr. Johnson described as the flatlands, it truly was the flatlands, and all the way up to the edge of the purple area in District 1 was an estuary historically. So it was not a great place to live. There are street names like Quarantina. We had Indio Muerto, that's now Hutash. It was renamed last summer. Hutash being Chumash name for an earth god. And it's an area that reflects historic discrimination, and long story short. So that made the task easier technically in 2015, more vital politically in 2015, and certainly raised public interest in the process. Next slide, please.
All right, so let's see, we're up to slide 13 here. So getting back on track, and I was present with Ariel and Dr. Johnson when we were working on these districts, and I want to assure you that there was intense interest. And when these 21 maps come in, they don't come into you as they come in as full-blown maps because Dr. Johnson received them and formatted them and put them in the GIS system so that the city council had full consideration of them. These were not just maps drawn on a napkin at home. They were fully considered. And Dr. Johnson, you can remind me, but I think some of the elements that came forth from the citizenry were incorporated in the final shape of the district.
Oh, yes, definitely. We always try to go through 2 or 3 rounds of looking at maps, getting input, and then often the residents will take that input and draw new maps. And that definitely was happening here, where we were trying to get that input and revise the maps to reflect the input.
Okay, so
I might interject on that. One of the changes that you'll see when we give you a better version of the 1966 map relates to the downtown District 6. It grew. It turns out that the central part of the city in District 6 is populated by a lot of what I would call young, politically motivated, energetic people who wanted their own district. And the data supported doing it, and the council did it. That's all.
all right, thank you, Ariel. Now, slide number 13 is a summary slide, simply intended to show you that the very short period of time between receipt of data and completion of your job on November 1 renders it probably impossible for you to meet certainly the intent of the law for that sort of public participation, public hearings, a notice period, etc. And if not the letter, I don't know how you can fit it all in 2 months or in 2 weeks or a month at most. So going on to slide number 14, I do want to recognize that we're not the only ones with a crunch. Our crunch is worse than most, but we're not the only ones with a crunch because of the delayed census data. The California Redistricting Commission foresaw the same crunch. Their deadline, which was, what was it? Was it October 1? Is in the Constitution. It's very close to
August. Yeah.
Was it August 1? And that was July 1 for maps, was in the Constitution. When the first rumblings in 2020 came out that the census data had become such a political football, was going to be delayed. The legislature went to the Supreme Court on behalf of the California Redistricting Commission and had their date modified. Their date was modified to December 15, and it slides with the delay in the census data. Right now, that slide is to about January 15. But that Supreme Court decision, the Padilla decision, reformed an initiative that resulted in a constitutional amendment in order to effectuate the will of the voters, the intent of the voters. And there are several key cases that support this authority in a court.
I need to interrupt. I think we're behind the slide here. I can't quite raise. There we go.
You got it? Are we behind the slide? I'm sorry. Did we move up?
Now we're up to Padilla. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Ariel. So, but as Padilla was a great idea for the California Redistricting Commission, but it only affected that commission, nobody else. So moving on to the next slide. The legislature then got in the act because it could see this redistricting disaster about to happen. At the time, the primary was in March. And there was no way with delayed redistricting that you would be able to get the redistricting done on the local level to meet filing deadlines for a March primary election. So SB 970 last year moved the primary back to June. We also had amendments to the Fair Maps Act in 1276, which gave more time to cities and counties. And currently there's urgency legislation pending in the Senate. It's a Glazer bill, SB 594, which is making further adjustments in light of the most recent census announcements. And while these vehicles are important to other jurisdictions, none of them impact either the settlement agreement in Bañales or the city charter. The deadline is in the charter, not in state law. State law allows charter cities to have a different deadline, but the deadline in the Santa Barbara charter doesn't work. And so that's why we need to take action to adjust that. So we're back to the slide that we started with, and that is our recommendation that the commission find and determine that it's presently impossible to comply with the November 1, 2021 redistricting, and to direct the city attorney to take necessary actions to get the documents, including those deadlines, amended or reformed. Those documents would include a settlement agreement and stipulated judgment, which can be handled by supplemental agreements and with the parties, and the city attorney is prepared to approach them. And then we are confident that the law supporting reformation of ballot measures to achieve their intent will support a reformation of the ballot measure that amended the charter. That was done by the voters. The voters' intent was that this commission do the redistricting. If the date is left at November 1, that intent will likely be defeated. It's going to be a sham of a process. It will not comply with law. And we believe that there is authority that would allow the city attorney to request a reformation of that ballot measure from the appropriate court. And with that, Ariel, do you have anything to add?
I do. I'd like to get the slide advanced so we can have our recommendation up on the screen.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Sarah. I'm not good at that. So there we go. This is the recommendation.
So at the outset, I mentioned there's a little bit of ambiguity intentionally in recommendation 2, and that's the word appropriate. We are not asking, I am not asking for a blank check to decide what's appropriate. I'm asking for the direction to go ahead with Ms. Leone, figure out what's appropriate, come back to you, and then proceed. As Ms. Leone said, we are looking at 3 documents that need work: the charter, the stipulated judgment, and the settlement agreement. Our mayor took the liberty of contacting the plaintiffs. When our charter was amended, the plaintiffs had representation not from their original trial counsel, but from retired Judge Frank Ochoa here in Santa Barbara County. It's my understanding that the plaintiffs are willing to work with us on the process, including the extension. And before reporting back to the commission on what appropriate action we would further recommend, we would reach out to the plaintiffs and make sure that they were fully on board with what we're describing. So with that recommendation, we're happy to entertain questions before you deliberate. And the motion is exactly what you see on the slide, but questions and deliberation would be our usual order of process. Thank you.
Thanks. Could I ask the question of how much time you think it would take, consulting with plaintiffs' counsel, et cetera, to come back with a list of what would be appropriate? Because it sounds like a long time, but the time flies. Sounds like we have a long time to deal with this, but we don't.
I would like to do it within a month. We can commit to scheduling a meeting next month to report back. I can reach out to them and report to you in writing sooner, but I don't imagine us conducting a meeting in less than 4 weeks. Would that work?
My question, I guess, would be to you, would that work? Clearly, working out stipulations with the plaintiff's counsel is something that can be done quite promptly, but bringing an actual action to reform or something takes what time it takes. So is it enough time if we were to say 1 month from now, yes, these are the steps we would like you to take? You'd have enough time to do that still? To
It's going
file?
to be a joint project with Ms. Leone, so I think it's okay. How do you feel?
We can get it done. We can bring back a roadmap to you in a month.
And that gives you enough time to do what you need to do to get the extension reasonably, not up to the wire.
Yeah, I think it does. I think we'll be approaching this according to our initial communications with Justice Ochoa on a cooperative basis. And I think that will help things along quite a bit.
I have a question. When you say initiate legal proceedings, what are you contemplating? Is this going to a writs court to get instant relief?
Yes. Yeah. All
So
of
it would
this,
be essentially, I'm sorry, it would be essentially on an ex parte application. So you would be looking for very, very quick relief.
yes.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
The outer limit clearly is this November 1st date that is tasking this commission with doing the work that's necessary to get it done in time. And so my view is, rather than to put a time limitation on the work that needs to be done with regard to, the stipulated judgment, the settlement agreement, and the charter amendment, maybe we should just recommend that we hear back within a certain amount of time, but not put a cap on the amount of time that's actually needed to do all the things that are required to get that charter amendment and those other documents amended, so that we'll have sufficient time once those once that census data is allowed to be manipulated from its legacy format, so that we can use it. So I think that clearly there's no question that November 1st date, given everything we've heard in this presentation, is something that has to be changed, and to allow the parties that are going to orchestrate the change as much time as they need to get it done, I think is important.
Your Honor, you're raising the second or third portion of the question as well, which is how long of an extension do we need? And again, there's intentional ambiguity in the recommendation. When we've discussed this internally, although our next election dependent on these data is in 2024, that's an eternity. And given the activity of our legislature and the community interest, we should keep this process moving. So part of our task when we come back would be to work with you to develop an appropriate outer limit to ask of the court and plaintiffs when we adjust the 3 documents we've talked about. My instinct, and that's all it is, so I would be completely deferential to your views, is that the end of 2022 is probably about as long as we would want to extend the process.
If I can ask a question to help us make our decision, how long did it take after you entered into the Benalis settlement for you to engage in the process that was needed to set up these new districts that were shown to us from the 2015 maps?
A few months. but sadly, that's not an exemplar process because it was done under the framework of the trial court basically saying, we want the plaintiffs to have justice with the election of November 2015. Our first move in that litigation was to say, we need to go to the voters. We can't get this done by 2015. That was thoroughly unpersuasive to the trial court. And so once we knew we had to get it done by November 2015, we worked pretty diligently in the first half of 2015 to get this done. So that's a poor example from my standpoint because it was so compressed. The only negative I would throw in is that while there were 21 or so maps submitted by the public, that process did include special participation rights for the plaintiffs. And so in fairness, I would say that process was biased towards the information provided by the plaintiffs. And I think intentionally, it was litigation and it was resolution of litigation. I am imagining a much broader universe of concern being raised by the public this time through, particularly if the data show major population shifts.
And if I could add, Ariel, if I could just add here, an exemplar, and Dr. Johnson, please join in, just by way of example. When a city is asked to move from an at-large system to a districting system, the state law covers the process of analysis and hearings, etc., that goes for 135 days. So that is what the legislature thinks is appropriate for the first move. And it also provides for a 90-day extension. So while we, as the city attorney mentioned, it was a rushed process to make sure we had districts in 2015, an unrushed process, or a process that the legislature thinks is appropriate, is in the range of about 135 days. And with an extension on the end of that to the public interest in these things is great. And in addition to that, I just want to point out the reason we're initially thinking that having a final map in the second half of 2022, certainly by the end of the year, but the second half captures the public interest, but avoids the crush at the first half of the year when every other city in the state is redrawing their lines because they have to meet the April 17 deadline. So this gets us past that deadline and allows then the city of Santa Barbara's commission to do its job. And why is that important? Because there's a paucity of talent in the state that can do what Dr. Johnson does. And they're extremely busy right now and will be insanely busy. I mean, I hate to use those extreme adjectives, will be without time and the end of 2021 and beginning of 2022. It takes a lot of pressure off the process to do it in the mid to the second half of the year, next year. Excuse me, 2020.
Ms. Leone or Dr. Johnson, my recollection from the program you put on at Pomona was that we've got, if not an order of magnitude, half an order of magnitude increase in the number of agencies that are doing districts as compared to 2015. Isn't that right? Didn't we go from?
Oh yeah.
What was the number?
Yeah, our estimates are that in 2011, there were about 160 or so jurisdictions that had to redistrict. And this time around, there are over 500. So it's very busy. And I would add too, it's not just folks like us, the demographers, that get stretched. It's also the residents, because the Santa Barbara County is going to be going through this, and they have a December 15th deadline because they have a June election. So they're going to have to rush, and residents will be running to those meetings. And the school districts are also going to be going through the districting process. So residents who care about this issue will be trying to go to the county meetings, trying to go to the school board meetings, and then trying to go to the city meetings. And if we're all jammed into 6 weeks, they're just going to miss the meetings. So extending this out.
We're sort of a standalone, essentially, that could wait till after this period because we don't have to be ready for 2022.
Correct.
Exactly. And the advantage is then the residents will learn about the process through the county and the school district process, and will come into this process somewhat experts themselves. So that should lead even better input from them, hopefully.
I don't know that it matters, but I feel like I ought to disclose that part of why we're not up in 2022 is that we took the position that the law that required even year elections of chartered cities did not properly apply to Santa Barbara as a chartered city, meaning this legislature overstepped and reached into what has been a traditional municipal affair when they demanded all cities go to even year elections. In the Voting Rights Act cases, the justification for interfering with local control, which I've spent 40 years defending, so I'll apologize in advance. The justification for interfering with local control was that the fundamental right to vote was being denied by the absence of district elections. You can't say that about even year or odd year. There's a practical impact, but there is not a legal impact on a person's ability to vote by virtue of even or odd year. So as it turns out, that law was found to be an improper intrusion into municipal affairs and litigation involving Redondo Beach, if I remember right. So rather than being stuck with a 2020 deadline to convert to even years, we pushed it out to something that was more rational for Santa Barbara.
The first election that the work that we're all going to be doing is going to affect would be November 2024, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I suppose, full disclosure, I haven't thought about what would happen if there were a recall or some other odd political maneuver like that, or unusual political maneuver.
Not that odd for California, apparently.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, no, and in that situation of a recall or a resignation, the old map would govern anyways.
Yeah.
Until we get a new one.
Until we have a new one.
Yeah.
So are we hearing then that with regard to any continuation of this November 1st deadline, that in order to allow adequate time for public participation, for proper deliberation, for consideration of multiple maps, until some decision is ultimately made, that the timeline should be pushed out to at least the middle of 2022?
I think that's correct. Go ahead, Ariel.
Well, yes, it's correct, but I want to emphasize that we are really depending on your judgment about the public process. So between the lines here, I suppose it's theoretically possible to get this done. The cost would be disenfranchising the community. In all candor, I don't want to be part of that, but
No.
it's your decision.
I'm sure none of us wish to be part of that either.
I think the way this is worded, given that it states to seek appropriate extensions of the November 2021 deadline, gives us flexibility, which I think is a good thing. I would hate to say that this will be completed by mid-2022. I think we can look at this in terms of the steps that need to be done, and kind of, once we have an initial extension, we could probably do a projected timeline. But until we have that initial extension, I don't think we can do anything. So I think we need to make a motion to do exactly what you're asking us to do.
Thank you. If there are concerns, bullet 2 could be modified to include a direction that we return to your commission prior to instituting any legal action for confirmation. And frankly, given our discussion, that would make me more comfortable if you would modify number 2 to include that direction that we return to you.
That's what I kind of heard you asking for, really.
Thank you.
I would be in total agreement with that.
And are you comfortable with a 1-month time frame for coming back?
I am.
I am,
And-
assuming that gives you enough time to get back to us.
Well, as I told the city council last Tuesday when they assigned me a hero pay ordinance, I can do it, but it's nights and weekends. You know, any misapprehension that public practice is easy, I'm sure is not something you as retired judges would buy. I know that you earned about 6 times what you were paid as judges. So long story short, I'm happy to work whatever hours it takes to get it back to you in a month.
Well, what's a realistic time? I mean, no one's anxious to kill you. Okay.
I think it's, Your Honor, I think it's disadvantageous to all of us to have delay and uncertainty. So while I don't like the time pressure, I think it's the right thing to do to push as hard as we can. If we have a fail, we can continue the meeting and we would notify you, but I don't anticipate a fail.
And can I make clear, this is to bring back to you the steps we're going to take. I'm not quite sure that even on a cooperative basis, we could come back to you in 1 month with the written hand.
Right.
Okay. But we can, Ariel, are you and I on the same track on this? But we could come back and say, this is what we've learned from the plaintiff. The modifications are underway. We intend to file on X. This is what the writ is requesting. These are the agreeable dates. These we think are workable. Please authorize us to proceed. Is that yes? Okay, with that understanding, we'll bring back the plan in a month.
With, again, I don't intend this to be false deference, it's genuine deference. It would be very valuable for the panel to give us guidance on the form of action so that if we do have multiple options of how to litigate this, I think your guidance would be both powerful for us and for whatever court gets to make the decision.
Okay. Any other questions by the panel?
Well,
When you spoke of deliberation, could I just ask how that is envisioned to take place? I'm always concerned about Brown Act issues. And I know Judge Kahn had another question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt that.
Go right ahead. I think I forgot what I was going to ask anyway.
When it comes back to you, interrupt immediately before I forget it again. That's what I have to do.
Given the size of the commission, there's really no opportunity under the state open meeting law, the Ralph M. Brown Act, for you to speak with each other outside of meetings. And this form of deliberation is not, in my mind, quasi-judicial. I believe you're in a quasi-legislative function creating these maps. Therefore, I don't think there is any basis for closed deliberations. So
Okay.
In the best city council context, deliberation takes the form of very hard questioning of staff and the elucidation of facts through those questions to create a foundation for whatever decision the commission wishes to make.
So we've basically been doing our deliberations for the last 20 minutes or so by
Yeah.
the question. Fair enough. Okay. Did you
Another,
think, Judge Khan, what your question was?
Well, I think I was going to ask about overlays and, what kind of information we would get in the form of census data that would allow us to look at that data and compare it to the existing maps. And so, in terms of how much time it might take, that's a lot of technical information, but I don't know what information would be provided. And yet it's the kind of information I think we need in order to put an estimate of the time that we might need to fairly deliberate. Census data that shows population shifts, ethnicity. There was some discussion about whether there were enough voters registered in a district. To what extent can we consider that? Just all these questions really going to affect the timeline, our timeline as a commission to do the job that we need to do.
Yeah, I can speak briefly to that. You're exactly right. We use a ton of data on this. We don't have it set up for Santa Barbara yet because we haven't really kicked off the process, but we can send you a map that Dr. Phillips put together for Goleta. It's an interactive kind of story map online, and it's just a web link we'll send you that shows all kinds of data we gather and put, general plan data, zoning plan data, census data, as you talked about. So that, yes, at a glance, you'll have available to you all those types of data that people might refer to when they're trying to define communities of interest and to help you through that. So you'll have that all at your fingertips, certainly.
Okay.
So what I heard was a consensus by the board that we approve the recommendation, direct that inquiry is made as to what steps can be taken to make the finding initially, I guess, that it is not going to be possible for us to follow the law by spirit or letter to get a map out by November 1st, 2021. And is anyone object to us making that finding? Judge White, Judge Khan?
No, I think it's pretty clear that we're never going to meet that deadline.
I'm not going to try to do it. Evenings and weekends will not do it. Okay. And then the second part is that we be asked to direct the city attorney to return to report to us recommendations for appropriate legal action to seek those deadlines, and perhaps at that time start talking about what the duration of the extension might be. Would that be an appropriate topic to take up at the next meeting as well? Okay. And Judge White and Judge Khan agreed to make that order. Okay, make that request.
Yeah, I would agree that the language that is proposed be modified to include that we get periodic progress reports on what needs to be done and the timelines that are needed, and that the first progress report be given to us with a plan of action within 30 days. Was that basically what's on the table?
if that's your motion, Your Honor.
I'm sorry?
If that's the motion, you can deliberate it, and once we get a second.
So, Madam Chairwoman, is that the motion?
I think you stated it well.
Okay.
A second? Usually the chair doesn't second. That's why I'm looking at Judge White.
I will second that.
Okay. All right. And I agree. So should we set a specific date for us to meet again? I know that our future proceedings are part of the agenda, but should we do that at this point?
Do we officially have to call for a vote just to solidify it?
Do you need that for the record, Mr. Colon?
Your Honor, you did it by acclamation. We have a motion by Judge Khan, seconded by Judge White, carried unanimously. The modification to what's on the screen is that you have directed the city attorney to return to report on recommendations on appropriate legal proceedings and the duration of the potential extension within roughly 30 days. My hesitance on picking a date is I know Wednesdays at 5 are convenient. I want to make sure we get the right Wednesday for the commission. And so I'd like the opportunity to work with your staff after this to pick the right Wednesday in about 4 weeks.
I can only say that my calendar for that, which would be the 26th of May, would that be correct?
That's a yes, Your Honor.
Would be available. I can tell you that for certain now. But I mean, feel free to check with our staffs. But just tentatively, Judge White, do you think that works for you?
We would be convening again at 5 o'clock.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And
That's
Judge-
fine.
Yeah, I don't have anything scheduled for that day. And if we all agree, I'll just instruct staff that if they, assign a mediation to me, it'd be a half day and it'd certainly not exceed the 5 o'clock needed for the meeting.
So we can commit to that now, I think.
Thank you, Your Honor. Commitment back to you. I will make every effort to have representatives of the plaintiffs appear.
Very nice.
We will post our report again no later than the Friday before your meeting, probably Thursday ahead of it. We have, if the commission's concluded on item 2, we do have item 3 if there's anything else. And what I was thinking of in particular is along the lines of Judge Kahn's question, which Dr. Johnson started to answer, and that is, what additional materials can we provide you during this interregnum before you're working hard on maps? I heard Judge Kahn asking also not just about the data, but the criteria that go into redistricting. I included a list of that in the slides that I'd sent you earlier from December. We could certainly prepare a more comprehensive report during the summer of the legal criteria you're required to consider. And Ms. Leone can help me here. I think there are relatively concise bundles of facts that typically fall into one or the other of the categories you're required to consider. Population equality, for example, communities of interest. Is there a common language newspaper in the area? Common language radio? Those kinds of factors. Ms. Leone, does that sound like a feasible or a practical brief we can prepare?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And we will have the experience right now. We can draw on the experience of other commissions, including the statewide commission, about what went into identification of communities of interest. Is it only mapping? Is it, you've got to map it because we're doing a map. But what are the considerations? Is it, obviously, it's not only race. A big community of interest for Santa Barbara was the downtown area and the health of that area and the interest of the whole council in that area. But we also have people with concerns. Dr. Johnson and I worked on the redistricting in the state of Arizona in 2001. In every single meeting, people who had historical structures, they were brick houses in Phoenix, came to that meeting, and they say our ability to protect these structures for the legacy of the city depend on our ability to communicate effectively as a group with a single legislator. And they got their district.
Wow.
So what's gonna come to you as a community of interest is not always gonna be the obvious, but we can bring examples like that to you so that you'll be prepared. And I think that at some point along the line, Judge Kahn, I hear your real interest in the data Dr. Johnson, we will have a public tool for the public to draw maps. That tool will be data rich. And Dr. Johnson will also instruct you on the use of that tool, so you can look at maps yourself. So yes, I think we can do that, Ariel, and bring to bear our experience in those areas.
I have a question about community of interest, if I can ask it. And
Yeah.
it was triggered by, I think, a comment that Dr. Johnson had made about prison populations. Is UC Santa Barbara within the city of Santa Barbara?
No,
No,
you're,
Pardon?
no.
no.
No, okay.
That's
Okay.
a very specific community of interest, isn't it? Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a specific community of interest, and the challenge of counting the students there. They were supposed to be counted at the university when they went home, were sent home on the 17th of March, and the census occurred on the 1st of April.
Yeah.
Still don't know what that looks like, Dr. Johnson. But anyway, happy to say it's not your concern. Ariel, do we have student housing in the city, though?
We do. The city college here is a major feeder to UC Santa Barbara. This, and by the way, this is the least town and gown of any university town I've worked in. Boulder and Palo Alto were town and gown. This is not town and gown. But City College can be influential. And what was interesting last time is that, and I'm not sure how current this is, we had the influx of 3 foreign language focused schools that brought in several thousand students from other countries. And it created a mini housing crunch a few years ago here. So interesting communities of interest pop up. The other one that Ms. Leone reminded me of was not unlike Phoenix, or Arizona rather. We have an historic district known as the Brinkerhoff District that was originally associated with that west side patch in District 3. They said, we're an historic district on the other side of the freeway. We should be associated with downtown District 6. And the numbers allowed the council to accept that. So it's not uncommon that communities of interest cluster around unusual issues, not things you would think of as strictly political interests.
And my question, Ariel, is we also had a group, and it was a Latino group, cluster around a park on the beach, and the importance of that to the health of their community. Right. It's going to be very interesting.
What about historic homes? Is there a cluster of areas where there are historic homes where it might be argued by the homeowners that they certainly have an interest in the preservation of the area and, you know, the streets and sidewalks and everything else to be properly maintained, consistent with the area's preservation?
You're a mind reader, Your Honor.
You'll be hearing about all different kinds of neighborhoods, historic, hillside.
Not to be outdone by Pasadena, Santa Barbara has an area they call Bungalow Haven rather than Heaven. And it is a want-to-be historic district. On May 18th, we're bringing a revised historic resources ordinance to the City Council's Ordinance Committee. So there'll be plenty of historic preservation that's stirred up for you.
I can tell you just by doing family law cases in Santa Barbara, a house that is 1 block removed from another house, but otherwise identical, can have a difference of $100,000, $150,000 in value because one is a more precious community than the 1 block away. Yeah. They look the same from the outside somehow, but.
as Ariel said, we are, and maybe have we got to this on the agenda, resources? The city, Ariel, was planning to put together resources that are available to you. And we will certainly bring forth trainings on these issues.
That would be very helpful. I know Dr. Johnson mentioned that there had been a seminar out in Pomona, and maybe some educational materials from that seminar might be useful.
Yes, exactly. It's the rival. Yeah, I'll already start putting together links to that conference and other sources.
Be great.
And they will be posted so that they're available to you, but also to the public.
Mhm.
They'll be able to access these materials.
I would like to say, since I'm complimenting people, but and sincerely, that it was very easy to use the website to access the materials that you had posted here. Not all are that easy. This one was very easy for me to find everything I needed for today.
I won't tell you how many people I had to call to figure out how to do it.
I'm not usually the one who gets it the first time, so it had to be pretty good.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right.
Your Honor, we don't have any public communications, I understand. Is that correct, Mark or Sarah?
That's correct.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Your Honors, we need to take public comment on the agenda items. So.
And Ms. Gorman's telling us we don't have any public comment. So if the commission doesn't have any further direction, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Judge Kahn, anything else you'd like to talk
No.
about? Judge White?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you.
Very
Have a-
productive experience all around. Thanks.
Thank you
Yeah.
for an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look forward to working with all of you.
You'll find that Ms. Leone and Dr. Johnson are two of the best in the country.
Thank you, Ariel. That's very nice.
It's true.
Okay, yes.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Get out of here.
Leave the webinar.
See.